YouTube, y'all supposed to remind me to turn the damn speaker on. But the issue with it is the year that they won it did not make a Plymouth Fury. So they had to go and get the Plymouth Belvedere, and they had to get the Plymouth. They had to get a Belvedere and Bel Air. It's two cars that look like Christine. Christine is very long with the wings in the back, but a Fury is not exactly like that, so they had to replace her with a couple of other cars. Yeah. Gregory, what's going on? So yeah, they did not exactly make the Fury the way they wanted, so they used a. I keep wanting to say a Ford Bel Air and a Ford Belvedere. I really want to say Ford, but yeah, that's what they did. But in the book, okay, so if you saw the movie, you remember the fat kid that she kind of like ran into this. He ran down. Why the hell they did this? I don't know. Why the fuck you run in a straight line? I don't know. But instead of zigzagging like someone with common sense, he ran in a straight line and ran into the little closed off area and just stood there. And why he did not jump on the hood and run, I don't know. But stood there and let her crush him. In the book, Christine is a lot worse. Christine is vengeful as fuck. Megan, what's going on? Christine did not just crush this boy. Okay? She did not just crush this boy. Christine ran him down in front of this store. Okay? It was like a fix-it type store, like you bring appliances to get fixed. She ran him down in front of this store and ran his ass over. And then she ran his ass over and ran his ass over. Like when I say she ran him over, I mean she put the bitch in reverse. Okay? She put it in reverse. And then put it in drive. And then put it in reverse. And then put it in drive. The book describes him as a pretty much a liquid puddle of himself. That's how graphic the books describe this stuff, which is why I'm like, the movies don't do a lot of Stephen King's books justice. Ministries, what's going on? Mix Maxway, what's going on? Saying him not paying attention to my cameras and stuff. Hold on. I'm good, Sugar. How are you? Silky Pink, what's going on? So by all means, go ahead, ask your questions, and while you guys ask, we will continue on with chapter 3 of It. Brace yourselves. We'll go ahead and ask your questions. Oh, thank you, Sugar. I'm getting a lot of compliments on this color today. I like it. I likes it. mm. I have to forgive me. Today's job was outside, and apparently pollen is high as shit. And I would believe so after all this rain. Honey, when I say my nose itched, my eyes itched, my skin crawled. What's your future looking like? I told you I don't read that far into the future. However, Ten of Cups is inverted. It is being shaken up. It is being shaken up. If you're used to cookie cutter, assembly line type things, it ain't about to happen that way. The assembly line is about to break. The belt is about to break. Something is going to go amiss. meaning it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to go the way you think it is. Eight of Pentacles is upright. Oh, excuse me. Eight of Pentacles being upright is, to me, you focusing on what you really want to do. You focusing on your craft. You focusing on what you really like doing. I feel like this is also you balancing checkbooks. I feel like you're about to sit down with your finances and really balance. You're really about to balance some things out. Tay, what's going on? And then the devil is inverted. There's a difference between an addiction and then obsessive, focused. The difference between an addiction, an obsession, and being focused is the level of intention, the level of thought, and then the level of clarity you have when you're doing it. An addiction, you are not of sound mind. An obsession, you are not of sound mind. But a focus, you are high. You can be highly focused. You can be a little focused, but you are doing it with a specific intention. Addiction, you can't help yourself. You're being compelled to do something. Obsession is the same way. An obsession can become an addiction. To me, I don't believe an addiction can become an obsession. I really think obsessions become addictions, for the simple fact that passion has to be there in the first place. You're focused. If you stay focused, for you right now, it's just a matter of you finding your focus. You have to find what you're focusing on. That's pretty much what you're down to right now. Star, what's going on? Patrick, what's going on? Patrick, Star. And of course, I should have done this before I started reading it, because I did not expect to read it on here. It is full of graphic detail. It is also based in a time frame where homosexuality is very frowned upon. Therefore, there are terms in here and there are phrases and ideologies that are not mine, and I do not hold them. There are terms in here that I will not use. They'll, try to make it as friendly as possible. It uses the word queer and not in a friendly term, so I will move around it. It uses the word that a lot of British people call cigarettes. So, we will just move around that. And by all means, keep asking your questions. And there are some, thank you, Miss Maxway. Sunny, what's going on? And be mindful, if you have or have not seen it, there is self-harm in it. This is the chapter which speaks on it. So if this is going to make you uncomfortable, I am giving you the disclaimer now to go ahead and wait it out. Like, maybe go get a cup of coffee, watch an episode of something for a while, and come back. Just letting you know. No, honey, I'm talking about the book. Saying that this book has things in it. It talks about suicide, okay? I'm trying to be nice and plain and fluffy about it, but apparently this is why I'm very plain with where I speak. It talks about that if it makes you uncomfortable, you might want to leave for a little bit and come back later. Thank you, honey. Miss Page, what's going on? By all means, ask your questions, because I am still reading as I am reading. I said we will be doing chapter 3 of it. Chapter 3, 6 phone calls, 1985. R. Fitz, what's going on? Stanley Uris takes a bath. Patricia Uris later told her mother she should have known something was wrong. She should have known it, she said, because Stanley never took baths in the early evening. He showered early each morning and sometimes soaked late at night, with a magazine in one hand and a cold beer in the other. But baths at 7 p.m. were not his style. And then there was the thing about the books. It should have delighted him. Instead, in some obscure way she did not understand, it seemed to upset and depress him. About 3 months before that terrible night, Stanley had discovered that a childhood friend of his had turned out to be a writer. Not a real writer, Patricia told her mother, but a novelist. The name on the books was William Denbrough, but Stanley had sometimes called him Stuttering Bill. He had worked his way through almost all of the man's books, had in fact been reading the last on the night of the battle, the night of May 28th, 1985. Patty herself had picked up one of the earlier ones out of curiosity. She had put it down after just 3 chapters. It had not just been a novel, she had told her mother later. It had been a horror book. She said it just that way, all one word. The way she would have said sex book. Patty was a sweet, kind woman, but not terribly articulate. She had wanted to tell her mother how much that book had frightened her and why it had upset her, but had not been able. It was full of monsters, she said, full of monsters chasing after little children. There were killings and I don't know, but bad feelings and hurt, stuff like that. It had, in fact, struck her as almost pornographic. That was the word which kept eluding her, probably because she had never in her life spoken it, although she knew what it meant. But Stan felt as if he rediscovered one of his childhood chums. He talked about writing to him, but I knew he wouldn't. I knew those stories made him feel bad too. And then Patty Uris began to cry. Thank you, sugar. That night, lacking roughly 6 months of being 28 years from the day in 1957 when George Denbrough had met Pennywise the Clown, Stanley and Patty had been sitting in the den of their home in a suburb of Atlanta. The TV was on. Patty was sitting in the love seat in front of it, dividing her attention between a pile of sewing and her favorite game show, Family Feud. She simply adored Richard Dawson and thought the watch chain he always wore was terribly sexy, although Wild Horses would not have drawn this admission out of her. She also liked the show because she almost always got the most popular answers. There were no right answers on Family Feud. Exactly. Only the most popular ones. She had once asked Stan why the questions that seemed so easy to her usually seemed so hard to the families on the show. It's probably a lot tougher when you're up there under those lights, Stanley had replied. And it seemed to her that a shadow had drifted over his face. Everything's a lot tougher when it's for real. That's when you choke. When it's for real. That was probably very true, she decided. Stanley had really fine insights into human nature sometimes. Much finer, she considered, than his old friend, William Denbrough, who had gotten rich writing a bunch of horror books which appealed to people's baser natures. Not that the Urises were doing so badly themselves. The the suburb where they lived was a fine one, and the home which they had purchased for $87,000 in 1979 would probably now sell quickly and painlessly for $165,000. Not that she wanted to sell, but such things were good to know. She sometimes drove back from the Fox Run Mall in her Volvo. Stanley drove a Mercedes diesel. Teasing him, she called it the Sedanly. Philip, what's going on? And saw her house, set tastefully back behind low yew hedges, and thought, who lives there? Why, I do. Mrs. Stanley Uris does. This was not an entirely happy thought. Mixed with it was a pride so fierce that it sometimes made her feel a bit ill. Once upon a time, you see, there had been a lonely 18-year-old girl named Patricia Blum, who had been refused entry to the after-prom party that was held at the country club in the upstate town of Gloington, New York. She had been refused admission, of course, because her last name rhymed with Plum. That was her, just a skinny little kike Plum. Again, this is in the book, not my words. 1967 had been, and such discrimination was against the law, of course. Hardy har har, and besides, it was all over now. Part of her would always be walking back to the car with Michael Rosenblatt, listening to the crushed gravel underneath her pumps and his rented formal shoes. Back to his father's car, which Michael had borrowed for the evening, and which he had spent the afternoon waxing. By all means, ask your questions, because as I am reading this, I am also reading. Part of her would always be walking next to Michael in his rented white dinner jacket. How it had glimmered in the soft spring night. She had been in a pale green evening gown, with which her mother declared made her look like a mermaid. And the ideal of a kike mermaid was pretty funny. Hardy har har. The same one I was reading yesterday. They had walked with their heads up, and she had not wept. Not then, but she had understood they weren't walking back. No, not really. What they had been doing was slinking back. Slinking rhymes with stinking. Both of them feeling more Jewish than they had ever felt in their lives. Feeling like pawnbrokers, feeling like cattle car drivers, feeling oily, long-nosed, sallow skin, feeling like mockery, sheening kikes. Wanted to feel angry and not being able to feel angry. The anger came only later, when it didn't matter. At that moment, she had only been able to feel ashamed, had only been able to ache. And then someone had laughed. A high-pitched, shrill, tittering laugh, like a fast run of notes on a piano. And in the car, she had been able to weep. Oh, you bet. Here is the little mermaid whose name rhymes with Plum, just weeping away like crazy. Mike Rosenblatt had put a clumsy, comforting hand on the back of her neck, and she had twisted away from it, feeling ashamed, feeling dirty, feeling Jewish. Michael, what's going on? Golden Honey, what's going on? Jania, what's going on? The house set so tastefully back behind the yew hedges made that all better. Well, had made that better, but not all better. The hurt and shame were still there. And not even being accepted in this quiet, sleeky, well-to-do neighborhood could quite make that endless walk with the sound of grating stones beneath their shoes stop happening. Not even being members of this country club, where the maitre d' always greeted them with a quietly respectful, "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Uris." She would come home, cradled in her 1984 Volvo, and she would look at her house sitting on this expanse of green lawn, and she would often, all too often, she supposed, think of that shrill titter. And she would hope that the girl who had tittered was living in a shitty tract house with a goy husband who beat her. That she had been pregnant 3 times and had miscarried each time. That her husband cheated on her with diseased women. That she had slipped discs and fallen arches and cysts on her dirty, tittering tongue. Wireless, what's going on? She would hate herself for these thoughts, these uncharitable thoughts, and promised to do better, to stop drinking these bitter gall and wormwood cocktails. Months would go by when she did not think such thoughts. She would think, maybe all that is finally past me. I'm not that girl of 18 anymore. I am a woman of 36. The girl who heard the endless click and grate of those driveway songs. The girl who twisted away from Mike Rosenblatt's hand when he tried to comfort her because it was a Jewish hand, was half a life ago. That silly little mermaid is dead. I can forget her now and just be myself. Misha, what's going on? Okay, good, great. But then she would be somewhere, at the supermarket maybe, and she would hear sudden tittering laughter from the next aisle, and her back would prickle, her nipples would go hard and hurtful, her hands would tighten on the bar of the shopping cart, or just on each other. And she would think, someone just told someone else that I'm Jewish, that I'm nothing but a big-nosed Maki K. That Stanley's nothing but a big-nosed Maki K. He's an accountant. Sure, Jews are good with numbers. We let them into the country club. We had to back in 81 when that big-nosed Maki gynecologist won his suit. But we laugh at them. We laugh and laugh and laugh. Or she would simply hear the phantom click and grate of stones and think, mermaid, mermaid. Then the hate and shame would come flooding back like a migraine headache. And she would despair not only for herself, but for the whole human race. Werewolves. The book by Denbrough. The one she had tried to read and then put aside was about werewolves. Danny, what's going on? Werewolves. Shit. What does a man like that know about werewolves? Most of the time, however, she felt better than that. Felt she was better than that. She loved her man. She loved her house. And she was usually able to love her life and herself. Things were good. They had not always been that way, of course. Were things ever? When she'd accepted Stanley's engagement ring, her parents had been both angry and unhappy. She had met him at a sorority party. He had come over to her school from New York State University, where he was a scholarship student. They had been introduced by a mutual friend, and by the time the evening was over, she suspected that she loved him. That's quick as fuck. By the midterm break, she was sure. When spring came around and Stanley offered her a small diamond ring with a daisy pushed through it, she had accepted. In the end, in spite of their qualms, her parents had accepted it as well. There was little else to do. Well, there was little else they could do, although Stanley Uris would soon be sallying forth into a job market glutted with young accountants. And when he went into that jungle, he would do so with no family finances to backstop him. And with their only daughter as his hostage to fortune. But Patty was 22, a woman now, and would herself soon graduate with a BA. I'll be supporting that four-eyed son of a bitch for the rest of my life, Patty had heard her father say one night. Her mother and father had gone out for dinner, and her father had drunk a little too much. Shh, she'll hear you, Ruth Blum said. Patty had lain awake that night until long after midnight. D. Carter, what's going on? Dry-eyed, alternately hot and cold, hating them both. Thank you, sugar. She had spent the next 2 years trying to get rid of that hate. There was too much hate inside her already. Sometimes when she looked into the mirror, she could see the things it was doing to her face. The fine lines it was drawing there. That was a battle she won. Stanley had helped her. Hi, Manaya, how are you? Even though I am reading, we still speak when we come into this household. So how are you, dear? Miss Benjamin, what's going on? I see. Manaya, are you going to speak? I mean, just came straight on through here. How was the situation with my dad and his wife turn out? Well, good evening to you too. Stop it before I put you out. Both of you move. Adishana, what's going on? I guess she is not. Where were we? His own parents, love, what's going on? His own parents had been equally concerned about the marriage. They did not, of course, believe their family was destined for a life of squalor and poverty, but they thought the kids were being hasty. Donald Uris and Andrea Bertoli had themselves been married in their early 20s. But they seem to have forgotten that fact. Oh, honey, welcome, welcome. Okay, I guess she left. Okay. Only Stanley had seemed sure of himself, confident of the future, unconcerned with the pitfalls their parents saw strewn all about the kids. And in the end, it was his confidence rather than their fears which had been justified. In July of 1972, with the ink barely dry on her diploma, Patty had landed a job teaching shorthand and business English in Trainer, a small town 40 miles south of Atlanta. When she thought of how she had come by that job, it always struck her as a little, well, eerie. She had made a list of 40 possibles from the ads in the teachers' journals, then had written 40 letters over 5 nights, 8 each evening, requesting further information on the job and an application for each. 22 replies indicated that the positions had been filled. 22 replies indicated that the positions had been filled. In other cases, a more detailed explanation of the skills needed made it clear she wasn't in the running. Applying would only be a waste of her time and theirs. She had finished with a dozen possibles. Each looked as likely as any other. Stanley had come in while she was puzzling over them and wondering if she could possibly manage to fill out a dozen teaching applications without going totally bonkers. He looked at the strewn of papers on the table and then tapped the letter from the trainer superintendent of schools. A letter which to her looked no more or less encouraging than any of the others. "There," he said. She looked up at him, startled by the simple certainty in his voice. "Do you know something about Georgia that I don't?" "Nope. Only time I was ever there was at the movies." She looked at him, an eyebrow cocked. Gone with the Wind, Vivian Lee, Clark Gable. I'll think more about it tomorrow, for tomorrow is another day. Oh, he's trying to imitate it. I'll think more about it tomorrow, for tomorrow's another day. Do I sound like I come from the South, Patty? Yes, South Bronx. If you don't know anything about Georgia and you've never been there, then why? Because it's right. "You can't know that, Stanley." "Sure I can," he said simply. "I do." Looking at him, she had seen he wasn't joking. He really meant it. She had felt a ripple of unease go up her back. "How do you know?" He had been smiling a little. Now the smile faltered, and for a moment he had seemed puzzled. His eyes had darkened as if he looked inward, consulted some interior device which ticked and whirred correctly, but which ultimately he understood no more than the average man understands the workings of the watch on his wrist. "The turtle couldn't help us," he said suddenly. He said that quite clearly. She heard it. That inward look, that look of surprised musing, was still on his face, and it was starting to scare her. "Stanley, what are you talking about?" "Stanley!" he jerked. She had been eating peaches as she went over the applications, and his hand struck the dish. It fell on the floor and it broke. His eyes seemed to clear. "Oh, shit. I'm sorry. It's all right. Stanley, what were you talking about?" "I forget," he said. "But I think we ought to go to Georgia. I think we ought to go to Georgia, baby love." "But trust me," he said. So she did. Her interview had gone smashingly. She had known she had the job when she got on the train back to New York. The head of the business department had taken an instant liking to Patty, and she to him. She had almost heard the click. The confirming letter had come a week later. The Trainer Consolidated School Department could offer her $9,200, and a probationary contract. You are going to starve, Herbert Blum said when his daughter told him she intended to take the job. And you will be hot when you starve. Fiddle dee dee, Scarlett, Stanley said when she told her what her father had said. She had been furious, near tears, but now she began to giggle. And Stanley swept her into his arms. Hot they had been, starved they had not. They were married on August 19th, 1972. Patty Uris had gone to her marriage bed a virgin. She had slipped naked between cool sheets at a resort hotel on the Ponocos. Her mood turbulent and stormy. Lightning flares of wanting and delicious lust, dark clouds of fright. When Stanley slid into bed beside her, ropey with muscle, his penis an exclamation point rising from gingery pubic hair, she had whispered, "Don't hurt me, dear." "Anita, what's going on?" "I would never hurt you," he said as he took her in his arms. And it was a promise he had kept faithfully until May 28th, 1985, the night of the bath. Her teaching had gone well. Stanley got a job driving a bakery truck for $100 a week. In November of that year, when the Trainer Flats Shopping Center opened, he got a job with H&R Block. Boy, H&R Block been around for a while. With the H&R Block office out there for $150. Their combined income was then $17,000 a year. This seemed a king's ransom to them. In those days when gas sold for 35 cents a gallon and a loaf of white bread could be had for a nickel less than that. In March of 1973, with no fuss and no fanfare, Patty Uris had thrown away her birth control pills. In 1975, Stanley quit H&R Block and opened his own business. All four in-laws agreed that this was a foolhardy move. Not that Stanley should not have a business of his own. God forbid he should not have his own business. But it was too early, all of them agreed. And it put too much of the financial burden on Patty. At least until the pisher knocks her up. Herbert Blum told his brother morosely after a night of drinking in the kitchen. And then I'll be expected to carry them. The consensus of in-law opinion on the matter was that a man should not even think about going into business for himself until he had reached a more serene and mature age. 78, say. Again, Stanley seemed almost preternaturally confident. I love his words. He was young, personable, bright, apt. He had made contacts working for a block. All those things were givens, but he could not have known that Corridor Video. I think it's Corridor Video because I think I've heard of them. A pioneer in an nascent videotape business. Was about to settle on a huge patch of farmed out land less than 10 miles from the suburb to which the Urises had eventually moved in 1979. Nor could he have known that Corridor would be in the market for an independent marketing survey less than a year after his move to Trainer. Even if Stan had been privy to some of this information, he surely could not have believed they would give the job to a young, respectable Jew who happened to be a damn Yankee. A Jew with an easy grin, a hip-shop way of talking, a taste for bell-bottom jeans on his days off, and the last of ghosts of his adolescence acne still on his skin. Yet, they had, and it seemed to Stan they had known it all along. His work for CV led to an offer for a full-time position with the company, starting salary $30,000 a year. And that really is only the start, Stanley told Patty in bed that night. They're going to grow like corn in August, my dear. If no one blows up the world in the next 10 years or so, they're going to be right up there on the big board along with Kodak and Sony and RCA. Rainbow, what's going on? So what are you going to do? She asked, already knowing. I'm going to tell them what a pleasure it was to do business with them, he said and laughed and drew her close and kissed her. Moments later, he mounted her. And there were climaxes. 1, 2, and 3. Like bright rockets going off in the night. But there was no baby. What's going on, Rainbow? How you doing, sugar? And like I said, by all means, ask your questions. I am reading and I am reading. Although I think some of y'all are getting caught up in the story. Maybe I should just dedicate like one live a week to the actual book. Whew, excuse me. His work recorder video had brought him into contact with some of Atlanta's richest and most powerful men. And they were both astonished to find that these men were mostly okay. In them, they found a degree of acceptance and broad-minded kindliness that was almost unknown in the North. Oh, nice, honey. I'm reading and reading, basically. Patty remembered Stanley once writing home to his mother and father. The best rich men in America live in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm going to help make some of them richer, and they're going to make me richer. And no one is going to own me except my wife, Patricia. And since I already own her, I guess that's safe enough. Oh, honey, the same old, same old. And because of the same old, this is why I switched it up a little bit. By the time they moved from trainer, Stanley was incorporated and employed 6 people. In 1983, their income had entered unknown territory. Territory of which Patty had heard only the dimmest rumors. This was the fabled land of 6 figures. And it had all happened with the casual ease of slipping into a pair of sneakers on a Saturday morning. This sometimes frightened her. Once she had made an uneasy joke about deals with the devil. Stanley had laughed until he almost choked, but to her, it hadn't seemed that funny, and she supposed it never would. The turtle couldn't help us. Sometimes, for no reason at all, she would wake up with this thought in her mind, like the last fragment of an otherwise forgotten dream. And she would turn to Stanley, needing to touch him, needing to make sure he was still there. It was a good life. There was no wild drinking, no outside sex, no drugs, no boredom, no bitter arguments about what to do next. There was only a single cloud. It was her mother who first mentioned the presence of this cloud. That her mother would be the one to finally do so seemed, in retrospect, preordained. It finally came out as a question in one of Ruth Blum's letters. She wrote Patty once a week, and that particular letter had arrived in the early fall of 1979. It came forwarded from the old trainer address, and Patty read it in the living room filled with cardboard liquor store cartons, from which spilled their possessions, looking forlorn and uprooted and dispossessed. In most ways, it was the usual Ruth Blum letter from home. 4 closely written blue pages, each one headed, "Just a note from Ruth." Donna, what's going on? Faze, what's going on? Her scrawl was nearly illegible, and Stanley had once explained he could not read a single word his mother-in-law wrote. "Why would you want to?" Patty had responded. This one was full of Mom's usual brand of news. For Ruth Blum, recollection was a broad delta, spreading out from the moving point of the now in an ever-widening fan of interlocking relationships. Many of the people of whom her mother wrote were beginning to fade in Patty's memory. like photographs in the old album. But to Ruth, all of them remained fresh. Her concerns for their health and her curiosity about their various doings never seemed to wane, and her prognoses were unfailingly dire. Her father was still having too many stomach aches. He was sure it was just dyspepsia. The idea that he might have an ulcer, she wrote, would not cross his mind until he actually began coughing up blood, and probably not even then. You know your father, dear. He works like a mule and he always thinks like one sometimes. God should forgive me for saying so. Randy Harlingen had gotten her tubes tied. They took cysts as big as golf balls out of her ovaries. No malignancy, thank God. But 27 ovarian, god damn. Oh shit. But wait a damn minute. Did I say 27? Hold up. Wait, I lost my place now. But 27 ovarian cysts, could you die? It was the water in New York City. She was quite sure of that. Bree, what's going on, honey? The city air was dirty too, but she was convinced it was the water that really got you after a while. It built up deposits inside a person. She doubted if Patty knew how often she had thanked God that you kids were out in the country, where both air and water, but particularly the water, were healthier. See how she keeps pointing to the water? Thank you, Anita. To Ruth, all of the South, including Atlanta and Birmingham, was the country. Aunt Margaret was feuding with the power company again. Stella Flanagan had gotten married again. Some people never learn. Richie Hubert had been fired again. And in the middle of this chatty and often catty outpouring in the middle of a paragraph, apropos of nothing which had gone before or which came after, Ruth Blum had casually asked the dreaded question. So when are you and Stan going to make us grandparents? We're all ready to start spoiling him or her rotten. Donna, what's going on? Soul, what's going on? And in case you haven't noticed, Patsy, we're not getting any younger. And then on to the Bruckner girl from down the block who has been sent home from school because she was wearing no bra and a blouse that you could see straight through. Feeling low and homesick for their old place in Trainer, feeling unsure and more than a little afraid of what might be ahead, Patty had gone into what was to become their bedroom and had lain down upon the mattress. The box spring was still out in the garage, and the mattress, lying all by itself on the big carpetless floor, looked like an artifact cast upon a strange yellow beach. She put her head in her arms and lay there weeping for nearly 20 minutes. And by all means, ask your questions. I just say, well, I don't have to tell Big O because y'all, and I don't have to tell most of y'all, but I seem to know to speak when you come into this room. Her mother's letter, she supposed that cry had been coming anyway. Her mother's letter had just brought it on sooner. Razzie, what's going on? The way dust hurries the tickle in your nose into a sneeze. Stanley wanted kids. She wanted kids. Their words compatible on that subject as they were on their enjoyment of Woody Allen's films. Their more or less regular attendance at synagogue, their political leanings, their dislike of marijuana, 100 of other things, both great and small. There had been an extra room in the Trainer house, which they had split evenly down the middle. On the left, he had a desk for working and a chair for reading. On the right, she had a sewing machine and a card table where she did jigsaw puzzles. There had been an agreement between them about the room so strong they barely spoke of it. It was simply there, like their noses or the wedding rings on their left hands. Someday that room would belong to Andy or to Jenny. But where was that child? The sewing machine, the baskets of fabric, and the card table, and the desk, and the lazy boy all kept their places, seeming each month to solidify their holds on the respective positions in that room, and to further establish their legitimacy. So she thought, although she could never quite crystallize the thought, like the word pornographic, it was a concept that danced just beyond her ability to quantify. But she did remember one time when she got her period, sliding open the cupboard under the bathroom sink to get a sanitary napkin. She remembered looking at the box of Stay Free pads and thinking that the box looked almost smug, seemed almost to be saying, "Hello, Patty. We are your children. We are the only children you ever have, and we are hungry nurses on blood." In 1976, 3 years after she had thrown away the last cycle of overall tablets, they saw a doctor named Harkavy in Atlanta. "We want to know if there is something wrong," Stanley said, "and we want to know if we can do anything about it, if there is." They took the test. They showed that Stanley's sperm was perky, that Patty's eggs were fertile, that all the channels that were supposed to be open were open. Bless, what's going on? Harkavy, who wore no wedding ring and who had the open, pleasant, ruddy face of a college grad student just back from a midterm skiing vacation in Colorado, told him that maybe it was just nerves. He told him that such a problem was by no means uncommon. He told him there seemed to be a psychological correlative in such cases that was in some ways similar to sexual impotency. The more you wanted to, the less you could. They would have to relax. They ought, if they could, to forget all about procreation when they had sex. Stan was grumpy on the way home. Patty asked him why. "I never do." "Do what?" "Think of procreation during." You know what? I'm convinced that men are like kids. Like, y'all stay kids no matter what. "I never do." "Do what?" "Think of procreation during." And by all means, y'all ask your questions. I'm just multi-reading. That's what I'm gonna call it. A multi-reading. She began to giggle, even though she was by then feeling a bit lonesome and frightened. And that night, lying in bed long after she believed that Stanley must be asleep, he had frightened her by speaking out of the dark. His voice was flat, but nevertheless choked with tears. "It's me," he said. "It's my fault." She rolled toward him, groped for him, held him. "Don't be stupid," she said, but her heart was beating fast, much too fast. It wasn't just that he had startled her, it was as if he had looked into her mind and read a secret conviction. A secret conviction she held there, but of which she had not known until this minute. With no rhyme, no reason, she knew that he was right. There was something wrong, and it wasn't her. It was him. Something in him. Thank you, Aileen. Thank you much, sugar. "Don't be such a klutz," she whispered fiercely against his shoulder. He was sweating lightly, and she became suddenly aware that he was afraid. The fear was coming off of him in cold waves. Lying naked with him was suddenly like lying naked in front of an open refrigerator. "I'm not a klutz, and I'm not being stupid," he said in that same voice, which was simultaneously flat and choked with emotion. "And you know it. It's me. But I don't know why." "You can't know any such thing." Her voice was harsh, scolding. Her mother's voice when her mother was afraid. And even as she scolded him, a shudder ran through her body, twisting it like a whip. Stanley felt his arms tighten around her. Sometimes, he said, sometimes I think I know why. Sometimes I have a dream, a bad dream, and I wake up and I think, I know now. I know what's wrong. Not just you not catching pregnant. Everything that's wrong with my life. Stanley, nothing's wrong with your life. I don't mean from inside, he said. From inside is fine. I'm talking about outside. Something that should be over and it isn't. I wake up from these dreams and think my whole pleasant life and been nothing but the eye of some storm, and I don't understand. I'm afraid, but then it just fades the way dreams do. She knew that he sometimes dreamed uneasily. On half a dozen occasions, he had awakened her, thrashing and moaning. Probably there had been other times when she had slept through his dark interludes. Whenever she reached for him, asked him, he said the same thing. I can't remember. Then he would reach for his cigarettes and smoke sitting up in the bed, waiting for the residue of the dream to pass through his pores like bad sweat. No kids. On the night of May 28th, 1985, the night of the bath, their assorted in-laws were still waiting to be grandparents. The extra room was still an extra room. The stay-free maxis and stay-free minis still occupied their accustomed places in the cupboard underneath the bathroom sink. The Cardinal still paid his monthly visit. I have not heard that phrase in forever. Wow, that's an old phrase. Her mother, who was much occupied with her own affairs, but not entirely oblivious to her daughter's pain, had stopped asking in her letters when she was going to be grandparents. Her letters and had stopped asking in her letters, and when Stanley and Patty made their twice yearly trips back to New York, there were no more humorous remarks about whether or not they were taking their vitamin E. Stanley had also stopped mentioning babies, but sometimes when she didn't know he was looking, she saw a shadow on his face. Some shadow, as if he were desperately trying to remember something. Other than that one cloud, their lives seemed pleasant enough. Until the phone rang during the middle of Family Feud on the night of May 28th. Patty had 6 of Stan's shirts, 2 of her blouses, her sewing kit, and her odd button box. Stan had the new William Denbrough novel, not even out in paperback yet, in his hands. There was a snarling beast on the front of the book. On the back was a bald man wearing glasses. ID channel, what's going on? Stan was sitting near the phone. He picked it up and said, "Hello, yours, residence." He listened, and a frown line delved between his eyebrows. "Who did you say?" Patty felt instant of fright. Later, shame would cause her to lie and tell her parents that she had known something was wrong from the instant the telephone had rung. But in reality, there had only been that one instant. That one quick look up from her sewing. But maybe that was all right. James, what's going on? Maybe they had both suspected that something was coming long before that phone call. Something that didn't fit with a nice house set tastefully back behind the low yew hedges. Something so much a given that it really didn't need much of an acknowledgement. That one sharp instant of fright, like the stab of a quickly withdrawn ice pick, was enough. "Is it Mom?" She mouthed at him in an instant, thinking that perhaps her father, 20 pounds overweight and prone to what he called the belly ache since his early 40s, had had a heart attack. Stan shook his head at her and then smiled a bit at something the voice on the phone was saying. You! Well, I'll be goddamn, Mike. How did you? He fell silent again, listening. As his smile faded, she recognized, or thought she did, his analytic expression. The one which said someone was unfolding a problem or explaining a sudden change in an ongoing situation or telling him something strange and interesting. This last was probably the case. She gathered a new client, an old friend, perhaps? She turned her attention back to the TV where a woman was flinging her arms around Richard Dawson and kissing him madly. She thought that Richard Dawson must get kissed even more than the Blarney Stone. She also thought she wouldn't mind kissing him herself. As she began searching for a black button to match the ones on Stanley's blue denim shirt, Patty was vaguely aware that the conversation was settling into a smoother groove. Stanley grunted occasionally, and once he asked, "Are you sure, Mike?" Finally, after a very long pause, he said, "All right, I understand. Yes, yes, everything. I have the picture. What? No, I can't absolutely promise that, but I'll consider it carefully. You know that." Oh, he did? Well, you bet. Of course I do. Yes, sure. Thank you. Yes. Bye bye. He hung up. Tammy, what's going on? Jasmine, what's going on? ID channel, what's going on? Patty glanced up at him and saw him staring blankly in his face over the TV set. On her show, the audience was applauding the Ryan family, which had just scored 280 points, most of them by guessing that the audience survey would answer math in response to the question, "What class will people say Junior hates most in school?" The Ryans were jumping up and down and screaming joyfully. Stanley, however, was frowning. She would later tell her parents she thought Stanley's face had looked a little off color. And so she did. But she neglected to tell them she had dismissed it at the time as only a trick of the table lamp with its green glass shade. Mione, what's going on? Who's that, Stan? He looked at her. She thought the look on his face was one of gentle abstraction. Hey, honey, by all means, ask your questions. I am multi-reading. I'm reading the book, and I will also read your questions. Perhaps mixed with minor annoyance. It was only later, replaying the scene in her mind again and again, that she began to believe it was the expression of a man who was methodically unplugging himself from reality, one chord at a time. The face of a man who was heading out of the blue and into the black. Who was that on the phone? No one, he said. No one, really. I think I'll take a bath. He stood up. What? At 7 o'clock? He didn't answer. Only left the room. She might have asked him if something was wrong. Might have even gone after him and asked him if he was sick to his stomach. He was sexually uninhibited, but he could be oddly prim about other things. And it wouldn't be at all unlike him to say he was going to take a bath when what he really had to do was whoop something, which hadn't agreed with him. Pretty much you're trying to say he's not one to say, "I gotta go take a shit." Oh, thank you for being a fan, honey. But now, new family, the Piscopos, were being introduced. And Patty just knew Richard Dawson would find something funny to say about their name. Sweet Kay, what's going on? And besides, she was having the devil's own time finding a black button. Although she knew there were loads of them in the button box, they hid, of course. That was the only explanation. So she let him go and did not think of him again until the credit until the credit crawl. When she looked up and saw his empty chair, she had heard the water running into the bathtub upstairs and had heard it stop 5 or 10 minutes later. But now she realized she had never heard the fridge door open and close, and that meant he was up there without a can of beer. Someone had called him up to someone had called him up and dropped a big fat problem in his lap. And had she offered him a single word of commiseration? No. Tried to draw out a little about it? Tried to draw him out a little about it? No. Even noticed something was wrong? For the third time? No. All because of that stupid TV show. She couldn't even really blame the buttons. They were only an excuse. Okay. She'd take him up a can of Dixie and sit beside him on the edge of the tub, scrub his back, play geisha, and wash his hair. Beautiful, what's going on? If he wanted her to. And find out just what the problem was. Or who it was. Figgy, what's going on? Like I said, go ahead, ask your questions. I'm reading and reading. She got a can of beer out of the fridge and went upstairs with it. The first real disquiet stirred in her when she saw that the bathroom door was shut. What kind of reading are you looking for, honey? Not just partway closed, but shut tight. Stanley never closed the door when he was taking the bath. It was something of a joke between them. The closed door meant he was doing something his mother had taught him. The open door meant he would not be averse to doing something the teaching of which his mother had quite properly left to others. What kind of reading are you looking for? Patty tapped on the door with her nails, suddenly aware, too aware of the reptilian clicking sound they made on the wood. And surely tapping on the bathroom door, knocking like a guest, was something she had never done before in her married life. Not here, not on any other door in the house. The disquiet suddenly grew strong in her, and she thought of Carson Lake, where she had gone swimming often as a girl. By the 1st of August, the lake was as warm as a bathtub, but then you'd hit a cold pocket that would shiver you with surprise and delight. 1 minute you were warm, the next moment it felt as if the temperature had plummeted 20 degrees below your hips. Thank you, sugar. Minus the delight, that was how she felt now, as if she had just struck a cold pocket. Only this cold pocket was not below her hips, chilling her long teenager's legs in the black depths of Carson Lake. Figgy, what kind of reading are you looking for? Okay, you know what? Whenever y'all ask for a reading, I'm just going to give y'all general. I'm going to do it that way. And if y'all have any specific ones, y'all need to start asking for it. Figgy, 2 of Wands is invert. You are not using your best logic. You have 2 minds about a situation. However, because you don't see the path already being there, you don't know which decision to make, which path to take. So you are choosing either not to take either path and not to take either action, or you are just not being logical and you are not making the wisest of decisions. Knight of Cups is upright. You move when the mood moves you. So when you feel it, you move. When it's pretty much when you give enough fucks about something, you do something about it. Knight of Cups also means you take action with your emotions. You take action with your heart. It has to move you emotionally for you to move. Queen of Swords is also upright. Queen of Swords being upright, that is the emotions actually moving you. That is the logic of the emotions. If the Knight of Cups is the emotions moving you, the Queen of Swords is the logic behind the action. Miss Sucker, what's going on? Whatever you do, make sure your logic is sound, because the reason you can't find the path and you don't see the path already being there is because of your logic, and it's because of your emotions. It's not there because it doesn't need to be there. If you feel stuck, it's because it's keeping you away from something else. It's pretty much keeping you from, you know how your mom always tell you to keep your ass in the house. Stop running with them damn boys. They don't mean you no good. It's keeping your ass in the house. It's keeping you safe by keeping you still. You know the shit don't feel right. You know the shit don't look right. So it's keeping you still. That's what it's doing. That's why you don't see a way. That's why you feel like it's not logical. And you're about to, honestly speaking, because you don't see it, I feel like you're about to sit here and be stupid enough to go against your better logic and do it anyway. Don't do it. Your heart is telling you it's wrong. Your brain, your intuition, everything about you is saying do not make a move. But because it's like you want to be, I don't know if it's like you want to be part of the crowd, you want to follow the line of everyone else because they're doing it. Pretty much what your mama told you. If they jump off a cliff, you gonna do it too. You see everybody else doing it, and you feel like you should be doing it too. It's not for you to do. What's your next move personally? Learn how to be damn happy. Learn how to truly be happy. What's your next move financially? Queen of Pentacles upright. This is actually, this is learning your finances. Whether this is taking a finance class, learning to balance your books. This is learning your finances. Michael, what's going on? Thank you, Anita. Right, tell them, gift me. I work hard. I do what I do because I'm good at it and I love it. But this is you actually sitting down and mapping out your finances, looking at your finances, blueprinting your finances, looking at where money is going. Look at where your money is going. I hope you are the only one that has hands on your money. I really hope you are the only one that has actual hands on your money. Miss Gemini, what's going on? Alfred, you're not? Ooh. Alfred, what's going on? Sassy, what's going on? See, that's the thing with me. I'm the only one that got access to my shit. If any money get missing, guess who I'm on the phone with? I know me and I'm like damn Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor said flat out he will call his accountant in the middle of the damn night. Hey, bring, how much did you say it was? Fuck it, bring it over. Let me see it. I'll be right down the phone with him. Gypsy, what's going on? Greatest Nana, what's going on? I done called my bank at 3 o'clock in the morning before. I mean, they weren't open, but still, the fact is the phone call got made. Storm, what's going on? I'm just saying. Now, I will tell you that the credit card area is open at that time, if I'm right. I'm good, sugar. How are you? By all means, ask your questions. Because I feel like somebody's waiting for this part. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody is waiting for this part. Like, cause I'm sorry. Like, I feel like I have someone who's a very visual listener, so like they're really in tune to this book right now. My bad. I just literally cut you off at like a really intense part. I'm so sorry. Um, um, Only this cold pocket was not below her hips, chilling her long teenager's legs in the black depths of Carson Lake. No, 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 honey. It by all means keep asking your questions. Keep asking your questions. No, no. Keep asking your questions. This one was around her heart. Stanley. Stan. This time she did more than tap with her nails. She rapped on the door. When there was still no answer, she hammered on it. Stanley, her heart. Her heart wasn't in her chest anymore. It was beating in her throat, making it hard to breathe. Stanley! In the silence following her shout, and just the sound of herself shouting up there, less than 30 feet from the place where she laid her head down and went to sleep each night, frightened her even more. She heard a sound which brought up panic from the below stairs part of her mind, like an unwelcome guest. Such a small sound, really. It was only the sound of dripping water. Plink. Pause. Donald, what's going on? Plink. Pause. Plink. Pause. Plink. She could see the drops forming on the snout of the faucet, growing heavy and fat there, growing pregnant there, and then falling off. Plink. Just that sound. No other. And she was suddenly terribly sure that it had been Stanley, not her father, who had been stricken with a heart attack that night. With a moan, she gripped the cut glass doorknob and turned it. Yet still, the door would not move. It was locked. And suddenly, three nevers occurred to Patty Uris in rapid succession. Stanley never took a bath in the early evening. Stanley never closed the door unless he was using the toilet. And Stanley never locked the door against her at all. Was it possible, she wondered crazily, to prepare her for a heart attack? Patty ran her tongue over her lips. It produced a sound in her head like fine sandpaper sliding along a board, and called his name again. There was still no answer except the steady, deliberate drip of the faucet. She looked down and saw she still held the can of Dixie beer in one hand. She gazed at it stupidly, her heart running like a rabbit in her throat. She gazed at it as if she had never seen a can of beer in her whole life before this minute. And indeed, it seemed like she never had. Or at least she'd never seen one like this, because when she blinked, her eyes, it turned into a telephone handset, as black and as threatening as a snake. May I help you, ma'am? Do you have a problem? The snake spat at her. Patty slammed it down in its cradle and stepped away, rubbing the hand which held it. She looked around and saw she was back in the TV room, and understood that the panic which had come to the front of her mind, like a prowler walking quietly up a flight of stairs, had his way with her. Now she could remember dropping the beer can outside the bathroom door and pelting headlong back down the stairs, thinking vaguely, "This is all a mistake of some kind, and we'll laugh about it later." He filled up the bathtub, and then he didn't remember. Then he remembered he didn't have cigarettes and went out to get them before he took his clothes off. Yes, only he had already locked the bathroom door from the inside, and because it was too much of a bother to unlock again, he had simply opened the window of the tub, gone down the side of the house like a fire crawling down the wall. Sure, of course, sure. Panic was rising in her mind again. It was like bitter black coffee threatening to overflow the rim of a cup. She closed her eyes and fought against it. She stood there, perfectly still, a pale statue with the pulse beating in his throat. Now she could remember running back down there, feet stuttering on the stair levels, running for the phone. Yes, oh sure, but who had she meant to call? Crazily, she thought, I would call the turtle, but the turtle couldn't help us. It didn't matter anyway. She had gotten as far as 0, and she must have said something not quite standard, because the operator had asked if she had a problem. She had one, all right, but how did you tell that faceless voice that Stanley had locked himself in the bathroom and didn't answer her that the steady sound of dripping water into the bathtub was killing her heart? Someone had to help her. Someone. She put the back of her hand into her mouth and deliberately bit down on it. She tried to think, tried to force herself to think. Apollo, what's going on? Roxy, what's going on? The spare keys. Spare keys in the kitchen cupboard. She got going. And one slipper foot kicked the bag of buttons resting beside her chair. Some of the buttons spilled out, glittering like glazed eyes in the lamplight. She saw herself in at least a half dozen black ones. So now she could see the black buttons that she couldn't see before. Mounted inside the door of the cupboard over the double basin sink was a large varnished board in the shape of a key. KD, what's going on? One of Stan's clients had made in his wood shop and given it to him 2 Christmases ago. The keyboard was studded with small hooks, and swinging on these were all the keys the house took. 2 duplicates of each key, each to a hook. Beneath each hook was a strip of mystic tape. Each strip lettered in Stan's small, neat printing. Garage, attic, D-stairs, bath. Upstairs, bath. Front door, back door. Off to one side were ignition key dupes were labeled MB and Volvo. Patty snatched the key marked upstairs bath, began to run for the stairs, and then made herself walk. Running made the panic want to come back, and the panic was too close to the surface as it was. Also, if she just walked, maybe nothing would be wrong. Or, if there was something wrong, God could look down, see she was just walking, and think, oh good, I pulled a hell of a boner, but I've got time to take it all back. Walking as sedately as a woman on her way to a ladies' book club meeting, she went up the stairs and down to the closed bathroom door. Marquise, what's going on? Stanley, she called, trying the door again at the same time. Suddenly more afraid than ever, not wanting to use the key because having to use the key was somehow too final. If God hadn't taken it back by the time she used the key, he never would. The age of miracles, after all, was past. But the door was still locked. The deliberate plink, pause of dripping water was her only answer. Her hand was shaking and chattered, and the key chattered all the way around the plate before finding its way into the keyhole and sucking itself in. She turned it and heard the lock snap back. She fumbled for the cut glass knob. It tried to slide through her hand again, not because the door was locked this time, but because her palm was wet with sweat. She firmed her grip and made it turn. She pushed the door open. Stanley? Stanley! She looked at the tub with its blue shower curtain bunched at the far end of the stainless steel rod and forgot how to finish her husband's name. She simply stared at the tub, her face as solemn as the face of a child on his first day of school. In a moment, she would begin to scream, and Anita McKenzie next door would hear her, and it would be Anita McKenzie who would call the police, convinced that someone had broken into the Uri's house and that people were being killed over there. Tequila, what's going on? But for now, this one moment, Patty Uri simply stood silent with her hands clasped in front of her against her dark cotton skirt. Her face solemn, her eyes huge. And now the look of almost holy solemnity, I can't never get this word right, solemnity began to transform itself into something else. The huge eyes began to bulge, her mouth pulled back into a dreadful grin of horror. She wanted to scream and couldn't. The screams were too big to come out. The bathroom was lit by fluorescent tubes. It was very bright. There were no shadows. You could see everything, whether you wanted to or not. The water in the tub was bright pink. Stanley lay with his back propped up against the rear of the tub. His head had rolled so far back on his neck that strands of his short black hair brushed the skin between his shoulder blades. If his staring eyes had been still capable of seeing, she would have looked upside down to him. His mouth hung open like a sprung door. His expression was one of abysmal, frozen horror. A package of Gillette Platinum Plus razor blades lay on the rim of the tub. He had slit his inner forearms open from wrist to the crook of his elbow, and then had crossed each of those cuts just below the bracelets of fortune. If you know what those are, look it up. Matter of fact, before I show you, because I want to make sure I'm showing you exactly right. Okay. So bracelets of fortune are actual bracelets, but you would wear them here, so they wouldn't fall further than here if they're made right. So that's where they fail. And if you don't get how severe this is, they're saying that he cut from here. Now they say if you want up the road, not across the street. He went from here to here. And then to ensure that you weren't closing that shit up. That's why I say the book is a much gorier thing. Just below the bracelets of fortune, making a pair of bloody capital T's. The gashes glared red-purple in the harsh white light. She thought the exposed tendons and ligaments looked like cuts of cheap beef. If you can show your fucking tendons and your ligaments, you cut till you can't. There's no moving this anymore. Watch Constantine, and you'll see when John tries to flick the lighter at the end, where he tries to take a cigarette and he tries to open it, and he can't move his hand correctly. He cut the tendons. He went too deep. A drop of water gathered at the lip of the shiny chromium faucet. It grew fat, grew pregnant, you might say. It sparkled, it dropped. Plink. He had dipped his right forefinger in his own blood and had written a single word on the blue tiles above the tub. Written in two huge, staggering letters, a zigzagging, bloody finger mark fell away from the second letter of this word. His finger had made that mark, she saw, as his hand fell into the tub, where it now floated. She thought Stanley must have made that mark, his final impression on the world as he lost consciousness. It seemed to cry out at her. I was hoping that it would be on here, but this is what they're saying he wrote. So it's it. Another drop fell into the tub. Plink. That did it. Patty Eurus at last found her voice. Staring into her husband's dead and sparkling eyes, she began to scream. Okay, anyone have any questions? Did your mom know you were there? Yep. Didn't I read this before? Did your aunt kind of set her up? Nope. Is luck coming your way this month? So when the cards fell fell with no because you don't feel like you can, but what I pulled was yes. So if you don't feel like it is, if you don't feel like you have any power over it, no, it won't. But if you feel like you have the intention for it, yeah. Then yeah, it will. Does your grandma have any messages for you? Nope. Rainer. Rainer is yep, and if I go by this card, this is you need to do what you need to do to prosper. Excuse me. Yeah, you need to do what you need to do to prosper, because that's what that guy does. Nigel. Nigel is no. And whoever, I forgot who it was on Facebook, I mean on YouTube, but you said about Don Quixote, and I found my Don Quixote book. It was underneath that, well, it was behind that box. What do I see? Up soon for me. Like, what are you talking about? Are you talking about something specifically? It's coming up for a birthday. Eight of Wands is upright. This is breaking free out of a dark situation. Could be travel as well, but this is more so being in a dark spot, a dark matter of thinking, and finally breaking free of it. King of Swords is inverted. It is not going to seem like the most logical action for you. Ace of Wands is upright. This is. You can research it. You'll research it and find out that it's literally it's not bad. And then Strength is upright. Pretty much as in Blade Trinity when he kept telling that girl, use it. Use it. And she finally found her voice to scream. You find your voice again. What's going on, Kay? Tyler, what? Your first is me, what? Wait a minute. Wait. What did I do? Oh, honey, everybody got to start somewhere. Oh, thank you, sugar. thank you, Les, bro. And you saying Hera. Like, I don't even think Big O understands what Hera means. Hera is the mother that will not be fucked over. Thank you, Anita. You will find your voice and you will roar loudly as hell. Trust me. You a Leo. Well, roar on. And that's the card that you ended up getting. Was the strength card. And the strength card is always a lion on it. Oh, looking at your new wife. Wait a minute. I think my ring size is a size 7. Wait, is it? Shit, my weight done fluctuated so much, ain't no damn telling no more. What the fuck? 11.5. Well, I can't talk. I think. Nah, I got some big handed people in my family. This should not surprise me. 11.5. God damn. Hold up. Are we talking about ring sizes or finger size? What the hell are we talking about here? Because 11.5 pretty goddamn big now. Well, that can't be because my ring size is not the same as my shoe size at all. Ooh, you done started some shit now. Right, because I likes food. Patrick ass can't cook. We be door dashing all damn day. They give like 75 for food a day. That sound damn near like Europe. I'm just saying, because in Europe, I found out that if they find out you have like a food allergy or food sensitivity, they give you a voucher per week for groceries. So you could get food, like food that you can eat. Makes me so mad that I'm in America sometimes. Girl found out she was gluten. I don't know if it was gluten sensitive or had a gluten allergy. Been getting a voucher from the government ever since. So upset with this. Meanwhile, I got every damn allergy on the planet, and I have to buy Zyrtec. That is bullshit. They should. They should gift. They should. But it's up to them. Oh, that too, but in general. Damn it, I put it back in the living room. The one time I don't have a knife in here. Ooh, how big is my deep freezer? The hell you preach? 1,700 for a deep freezer? Nah, baby. This better cure all. Every ailment better have every sin in it. And it look like it's smaller than my deep freezer. So what the fuck would I pay all this money for? Uh-uh. Nah, y'all doing too much. What the hell your deep freezer need a damn Wi-Fi for? Right? So it can make kimchi. Mm-mm. Nah. Make it go away. I don't want to see it anymore. um. Okay. Part two of this part. Now these are the 6 phone calls. Marcus, what's going on? Richard Tozier takes the powder. ID channel, what's going on? Rich felt like he was doing pretty good until the vomiting started. He had listened to everything Mike Hanlon told him, said all the right things. No problem, sugar. Have a good one. Lopez, what's up? He was vaguely aware that he was doing one of his voices. Thank you again, sugar. Um, he was vaguely aware that he was doing one of his voices. Not a strange and outrageous one like those he sometimes did on the radio. Kinky briefcase, sexual accountant, was his own personal favorite, at least for the time being. And positive listener response on Kinky was almost as high as for his listeners' all-time favorite, Colonel Buford Kiss Drivel, but a warm, rich, confident voice. And I'm all right voice. It sounded great, but it was a lie. Just like all the other voices were lies. How much do you remember, Rich? Mike asked him. Very little, Rich said, then paused. Enough, I suppose. Will you come? I'll come, Rich said and hung up. He sat in his study for a moment, leaning back in the chair behind his desk, looking out at the Pacific Ocean. A couple of kids were down on the loft, down the left, horsing around on their surfboats, not really riding them. There wasn't much surf to ride. The clock on the desk, an expensive LED quartz that had been a gift from a record company rep, said that it was 5:09 p.m. on May 28th, 1985. It would, of course, be 3 hours later where Mike was calling from. Sasha, what's going on? Or Sacha. Dark already. He felt a prickle of goose flesh at that, and he began to move, to do things. First, of course, he put on a record. Not hunting, just grabbing. Well, just grabbing blindly among the thousands racked on the shelves. Rock and roll was almost as much of a part of his life as the voices. And it was hard for him to do anything without music playing. And the louder, the better. The record he grabbed turned out to be a Motown retrospective. Marvin Gaye, one of the newer members of what Rich sometimes called the All Dead Band, came on singing. I heard it through the grapevine. Not much longer would you be mine. Oh, there's what lyrics in here. The, ooh, I bet you're wondering how I knew. That's the part that he heard, apparently. Then, not bad, Rich said. Thank you, Stephen. I know you were talking about my singing. Thank you, Sugar. He even smiled a little. I know you did. This was bad. And it had admittedly knocked him for a loop. But he felt that he was going to be able to handle it. No sweat. He began getting ready to go back home. And at some point during the next hour, it occurred to him that it was as if he had died and had yet been allowed to make all of his own final business dispositions. Not to mention his own funeral arrangements. And he felt as if he was doing pretty good. He tried the travel agent he used, thinking she would probably be on the freeway and headed home by now, but taking a shot on the off chance. For a wonder, he called her in. He told her what he needed, and she asked him for 15 minutes. I owe you one, Carol, he said. They had progressed from Mr. Tozier and Miss Feeney to Rich and Carol over the last 3 years. What's going on, Tay? Pretty chummy, considering they had never met face to face. All right, pay off, she said. Can you do the kinky briefcase for me? Without even pausing, if you had to pause to find your voice, there was usually no voice there to be found. Rich said, Kinky briefcase, sexual accountant here. I had a fellow come in the other day who wanted to know what the worst thing was about getting something. His voice had dropped slightly. At the same time, his rhythm had speeded up and become jaunty. It was clearly an American voice, and yet somehow conjured up images of a wealthy British colonial chappie who was charming in his muddled way as he was addled. Rich hadn't the slightest idea who Kinky Briefcase really was, but he was sure he always wore white suits read Esquire, and drank things which all came in tall glasses and smelled like coconut scented shampoo. I told him right away, trying to explain to your mother how you picked it up from a Haitian girl. Until next time, this is Kinky Briefcase Sexual Accountant saying you need my card if you can't get hard. I'm so sick of this man. I can't stand who the Mr. King, Mr. King, if you ever see my videos, we need to talk, sir. I need to know what drugs you were on when you came up with this little part here, cause your ass. There's something wrong with you. Oh my god. Mm. DJ, what's going on? Last breath, Lord. I mean, the book says you need the card if you can't get hard. So to need my card would imply the rest of the sentence. But into him. Carol Feeney screamed with laughter. That's perfect! Perfect! My boyfriend says he doesn't believe you can just do those voices. He says it's got to be a voice filter gadget or something. Just talent, my dear. Rich said. Kinky Briefcase was gone. W.C. Fields. Okay, so he's doing another voice. Just talent, my dear. Rich said. Kinky Briefcase was gone. W.C. Fields top hat. Red nose, golf bags, and all was here. I'm so stuffed with talent, I have to plug up all my bodily orifices to keep it from running out like, well, just running out. She went into another fit of screaming gale of laughter, and Rich closed his eyes. He could feel the beginnings of a headache. Be a dear and see what you can do, would you? He asked, still being W.C. Fields, and hung up on her laughter. Now he had to go back to being himself, and that was hard. It got harder to do that every year. It was easier to be brave when you were someone else. He was trying to pick out a pair of good loafers and had about decided to stick with sneakers when the phone rang again. It was Carol Feeney back in record time. He felt an instant urge to fall into the Buford Kiss dribble voice and fought it off. She had been able to get him a first-class seat on the American Airlines red-eye non-stop from LAX to Boston. He would leave LA at 9:03 p.m. and arrive at Logan about 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. Delta would fly him out of Boston at 7:30 a.m. and into Bangor, Maine at 8:20. She had gotten him a full-size sedan from Avis, and it was only 26 miles from Avis counter at Bangor International Airport to the Derrytown line. Only 26 miles, Rich thought. Is that all, Carol? Well, maybe it is, in miles anyway. But you don't have the slightest idea how far it really is to Derry. And I don't either, but oh God, oh dear God, I'm gonna find out. I didn't try for a room because you didn't tell me how long you'd be there, she said. Do you? No, let me take care of that, Rich said. And then Buford Kiss Dribble took over. You've been a peach, my dear. A Georgia peach. A cause. He hung up gently on her. I always leave him laughing. And then dialed 207-555-1212 for State of Maine Directory Assistance. He wanted a number for the Derry Townhouse. God, there was a name from the past. David, what's going on? I wonder if that's the real number. You know I'm about to Google it. 207 555 1212. Shit. That goes to. Holy shit. That goes to the main Department of Transportation. When did he write this book? Because it is one of his first. Well, it's not one of his first. Like, good God, no, it's not one of his first books. Um, I'm dead ass serious. When did he write this? He wrote this in 1986. No, it is the current number. Right now, if you look up Maine DOT, JD, what's going on? If you look up the Maine Department of Transportation, that is their number. It still is to this day. Well, Stephen King was one where if he used stuff, he used like if he's gonna use a building or something like that, it yeah, most likely would have been real. I thought you would have had to like pay some type of a pay something to have something like that in it, but this is in the 80s, so maybe they didn't have to back then. Mm. Learn something new every day. Um, wow. Yeah, that's the real number. He wanted a number for the Dairy Townhouse. There was a name from the past. He hadn't thought of the Dairy Townhouse in what, 10 years? 20? 25 years? I guess I'll put mine down there next. I mean, I can either, I can't tell you what you can and can't do. You grown. That's all I can tell you. However, Kevin Hart did put Nick Cannon's phone number out there, and Nick Cannon changed his number within 30 minutes. So, 25 years even? Crazy as it seemed, he guessed it had been at least 25 years. And if Mike hadn't called, he might never have thought of it again in his life. I'm sick of you. And yet, there had been a time in his life when he had walked past that great red brick building, great red brick pile every day. And on more than one occasion, he had run past it with Henry Bowers and Belch Huggins and that other big boy, Victor somebody or other, in hot pursuit. All of them yelling little pleasantries like, "We're gonna get you, fuckface! Gonna get you, you little smartass! Gonna get you, you four-eyed mm, cigarette." That's what I'm gonna call it. Your four-eyed cigarette. Had they ever gotten him? Before Rich could remember, an operator was asking him what city, please? In Derry, operator. Derry, God! Even the word felt strange and foreign in his mouth. Saying it was like kissing an antique. Do you have a number for the Derry townhouse? One moment, sir. No way. It'll be gone. Raised in an urban renewal project. Either raised or asked. Not sure. I'm gonna say raised. Mama K, what's going on? ID channel, what's going on? Raised or raised in an urban renewal program. Changed into an Elks Hall or Bolodrome or an electric dreamscape video arcade or maybe burned down one night when the odds finally ran out on some drunk shoe salesman smoking in bed. All gone, Richie. Just like the glasses Henry Bowers always used to rag you about. What's that Springsteen song say? Glory days? Gone in the wink of a young girl's eye. What young girl? Why, Bev, of course. Thank you, Mama K. And by all means, y'all ask your question. I am reading and reading. Change the townhouse. Change the townhouse might be, but gone it apparently was not. Because a blank robotic voice now came on the line and said, the number is 9418282. Repeat. The number is. But Rich had gotten it the first time. It was a pleasure to hang up on that droning voice. John, what's going on? It was too easy to imagine some great globular directory assisted monster somewhere in the earth sweating rivets and holding thousands of telephones and thousands of jointed chromium tentacles. This man is a master of painting with words. The Ma Bell version of Spidey's nemesis, Dr. Octopus. Each year, the world Rich lived in felt more and more like a huge electronic haunted house in which digital ghosts and frightened human beings lived in uneasy coexistence. And if you want to ask your questions, by all means, go ahead and ask your questions. Still standing, to paraphrase Paul Simon, still standing after all these years. He dialed the hotel he had last seen through the horn-rimmed spectacles of his childhood, dialing that number, 1-207-941-8282, was fatally easy. He held the telephone to his ear, looking out his study's wide picture window. The surfers were gone. A couple was walking slowly up the beach hand in hand where they had been. The couple could have been a poster on the wall of the travel agency where Carafini worked. That was how perfect they were. Except that was for the fact they were both wearing glasses. Gonna get your fuck face. Gonna break your glasses. Chris. His mind settled abruptly. His last name was Chris. Victor Chris. Hook Williams, what's going on? Oh, Christ. That was nothing he wanted to know. Not at this late date, but it didn't seem to matter in the slightest. Something was happening down there in the vaults, down there where Rich Tozer kept his own personal collection of golden oldies. Doors were opening. Gas Baby, what's going on? Only, they're not records down there, are they? Down there, you're not Rich Records Tozier. Hotshot K-Lad DJ and the man of 1,000 voices, are you? Are those things that are opening? They aren't exactly doors, are they? He tried to shake those thoughts off. Thing to remember is that I'm okay. I'm okay. You're okay. Rich Tozier's okay. Could use a cigarette is all. He had quit 4 years ago, but he could use one now, right? They're not records, but dead bodies. You buried them deep, but now there's some kind of crazy earthquake going on, and the ground is spitting them up to the surface. You're not Rich Records Tozier down there. Down there, you're just Richie Four Eyes Tozier. And you're with your buddies, and you're so scared it feels like your balls are turning into Welch's grape jelly. Those aren't doors, and they're not opening. Those are crypts, Richie. They're cracking open, and the vampires you thought were dead are all flying out again. A cigarette. Just one. Even a carton will do. For Christ's sweet sake. Gonna get you, Four Eyes. Gonna make you eat that fucking book bag. Townhouse, a male voice with a Yankee tang said. It had traveled all the way across New England, the Midwest, and under the casinos of Las Vegas to reach his ear. ID channel, what's going on? Rich asked the voice if he could reserve a suite of rooms at the townhouse beginning tomorrow. The voice told him he could, and then asked for how long. I can't say. I've got. He paused briefly, minutely. What did he have exactly? In his mind's eye, he saw a boy with a tartan book bag, running from the tough guys. He saw a boy who wore glasses, a thin boy with a pale face that had somehow seemed to scream, "Hit me! Go on and hit me!" in some mysterious way to every passing bully. "Here's my lips. Mash them back against my teeth. Here's my nose. Bloody it for sure and break it if you can. Box it near so it swells up like a cauliflower. Split an eyebrow. Here's my chin. Go for the knockout button. Here are my eyes, so blue and so magnified behind those hateful, hateful glasses. Those horn-rimmed specs, one bow of which is held on with adhesive tape. Break the specs. Drive a shard of glass into one of those eyes and close it forever. What the hell?" He closed his eyes and said, "I've got business in Derry, you see. I don't know how long the transaction will take. How about 3 days with an option to renew?" "An option to renew?" the desk clerk asked doubtfully, and Rich waited patiently for the fellow to work. "Oh, I get you. That's very good. Thank you. And I hope you can vote for us in November," John F. Kennedy said. "Jackie wants to do over the over office, and I've got all the lined up for my brother Bobby." "Mr. Tozier?" "Yes." "Okay, somebody else got on the line for a few seconds." Just an old poll from the DOP, Rich thought. That's dead old party, in case you should wonder. Don't worry about it. A shudder worked through him. He told himself again, almost desperately, "You're okay, Rich." "I heard it too," Rich said. "Must have been a line crossover. How are we looking on that room?" "Oh, there's no problem with it," the clerk said. "We do business here in Derry, but it really never booms." "That's all." "Oh, hey, the clerk agreed, and Rich stuttered again. He had forgotten that too. That simple northern New Englandism for yes. "Oh, hey, gonna get you, creep." The ghostly voice of Henry Bowers screamed, and he felt more crypts cracking open inside of him. The stench he smelled was not decayed bodies, but decayed memories, and that was somehow worse. He gave the townhouse clerk his American Express number and hung up. Then he called Steve Koval, the K-Lab program director. "Sup, Rich?" Steve asked. The last arbitrary ratings had shown K-Lab at the top of the cannibalistic Los Angeles FM rock market. And ever since then, Steve had been in an excellent mood. Thank God for small favors. "Big Mama Donna, what's going on?" "Well, you might be sorry you asked," he told Steve. "I'm taking the powder." "Taking?" He could hear the frown in Steve's voice. "I don't think I get you, Rich." "I have to put on my boogie shoes. I'm going away." "What do you mean going away? According to the log I have right here in front of me, you're on the air tomorrow from 2 in the afternoon until 6 p.m., just like always. In fact, you're interviewing Clarence Clemens in the studio at 4. You know Clarence Clemens, Rich? As in, come on and blow, big man?" "Sobo, what's going on?" "Clemens can talk to Mike O'Hara as well as he can talk to me." "Clarence doesn't want to talk to Mike, Rich. Clarence doesn't want to talk to Bobby Russell. He doesn't want to talk to me." Clarence is a big fan of Buford Kiss Dribble and Wyatt the homicidal bag boy. He wants to talk to you, my friend. And I have no interest in having a pissed off 250-pound saxophone player who was once almost drafted by a pro football team running amok in my studio. I don't think he has a history of running amok, Rich said. I mean, we're talking Clarence Clemens here, not Keith Moon. There was a silence on the line. Rich waited patiently. You're not serious, are you? Steve finally asked. He sounded plaintive. I mean, unless your mother just died or you got a brain tumor or something, this is called crapping out. I have to go, Steve. Is your mother sick? Did she, God forbid, die? She died 10 years ago. Have you got a brain tumor? Not even a rectal polyp. This is not funny, Rich. No. You're being a fucking busher and I don't like it. I don't like it either, but I have to go. Where? Why? What is this? Talk to me, Rich. Someone called me. Someone I used to know a long time ago in another place. Back then, something happened. I made a promise. We all promised that we'd go back if something started happening again. And I guess it has. What something are we talking about, Rich? I just as soon as not say. Also, you'll think I'm crazy if I tell you the truth. I don't remember. He doesn't say that out loud. When did you make this famous promise? A long time ago, in the summer of 1958. There was another long pause, and he knew Steve Colvin was trying to decide if Rich Records Tozier, a.k.a. Buford Kiss Dribble, a.k.a. Wyatt the homicidal bag boy, etc., was having him on or was having some kind of mental breakdown. Neha, what's going on? You would have been just a kid, Steve said flatly. 11, going on 12. Another long pause. Rich waited patiently. All right, Steve said. I'll shift the rotation. Put Mike in for you. I can call Chuck Foster to pull a few shifts, I guess. If I can find what Chinese restaurant he's currently holed up in. I'll do it because we go back a long way together, but I'm never gonna forget you bushed out on me, Rich. Oh, get down off it, Rich said, but the headache was getting worse. He knew what he was doing. Did Steve really think he didn't? I need a few days off is all. You're acting like I took a shit on your FCC charter. A few days off for what? The reunion of your Cub Scout pack in Shithouse Falls, North Dakota? Or Pussy Hump City, West Virginia? Actually, I think Shithouse Falls is in Arkansas, Bo. Oh my God. Good God, I have to sit here and try to do this voice. And he's saying big hollow barrel, so... Actually, I think Shithouse Falls in Arkansas, Bo. Buford Kiss Dribble said in his big hollow barrel voice. But Steve was not to be diverted. Because you made a promise when you were 11, kids don't make serious promises when they're 11, for Christ's sake. And it's not even that, Rich, and you know it. This is not an insurance company. This is not a law office. This is show business. Be it ever so humble, and you fucking well know it. If you had given me a week's notice, I wouldn't be holding the phone in one hand and a bottle of my Lanta in the other. You are putting my balls to the wall, and you know it. So don't insult my intelligence. Steve was nearly screaming now, and Rich closed his eyes. I'm never going to forget it, Steve had said. And Rich supposed he never would. But Steve had also said kids didn't make serious promises when they were 11, and that wasn't true at all. Rich couldn't remember what the promise had been, wasn't sure he wanted to remember, but it had been plenty serious. Steve, I have to. Yeah, and I told you I can handle it. So go ahead, you busher. Steve, this is ridiculous. But Steve had already hung up. Boss chick, what's going on? Rich put the phone down. He had barely started away from it when it began to ring again. And he knew without picking it up that it was Steve again, madder than ever, Talking to him at this point would do no good. Things would just get uglier. He slid the switch on the side of the phone to the right, cutting it off in mid-ring. Oh my God. Who else is old enough to remember when phones did that? When you could just cut the phone off by actually flicking the thing and cutting the phone off. He went upstairs, pulled 2 suitcases out of the closet, and filled them with a barely glanced at conglomeration of clothes. Jeans, shirts, underwear, socks. It would not occur to him until later that he had taken nothing but kid clothes. He carried the suitcases back downstairs. On the den wall was a black and white Ansel Adams photograph of Big Sir. Rich swung it back on hidden hinges, exposing the barrel safe. He opened it, pawed his way past the paperwork. The house here, poised cozily between the fault line and the brush fire zone. 20 acres of timberland in Idaho, a bunch of stocks. He had bought the stocks seemingly at random. When his broker saw Rich coming, he immediately clutched his head. But the stocks had all risen steadily over the years. He was sometimes surprised by the thought that he was almost, not quite, but almost a rich man. All courtesy of rock and roll music and the voices, of course. House, acres, stocks, insurance policy, even a copy of his last will and testament. The strings that bind you tight to the map of your life, he thought. There was a sudden wild impulse to whip out his Zippo and light it up. The whole horse combined of wherefores and know ye all men by these presents, and the bearer of this certificate is entitled. And he could do it too. The papers in his safe had suddenly ceased to signify anything. The first real terror struck him then, and there was nothing at all supernatural about it. It was only a realization of how easy it was to trash your life. That was what was so scary. You just dragged the fan up to everything you had spent the years raking together and turned the motherfucker on. Easy. Burn it up or blow it away, then just take a powder. Behind the papers, which were only Currency's cousins, Currency's second cousins, was the real stuff. The cash. $4,000 in 10s, 20s, and 50s. Taking it now, stuffing it into the pockets of his jeans, he wondered if he hadn't somehow known what he was doing when he put the money in there. $50 one month, $120 the next, maybe only 10 the month after that. Rat hole money, taking the powder money. Man, that's scary, he said, barely aware he'd spoken. He was looking blankly out the big window at the beach. It was deserted now. The surface gone, the honeymooners, if that was what they had been, gone too. Ah, yes, Doc. It all comes back to me now. Remember Stanley Uris, for instance? Betcha for I do. Remember how we used to say that? And think it was so cool? Stanley Urine, the big kids called him. Hey, Urine! Hey, you fucking Christ killer! Where are you going? One of your sick friends gonna give you a BJ? He slammed the safe door shut and swung the picture back into place. When had he last thought of Stanley Uris? When had he last thought of Stanley Uris? 5 years ago? 10? 20? Rich and his family had moved away from Derry in the spring of 1960, and how fast all their faces faded. His gang, that pitiful bunch of losers with their little clubhouse, and what had been known then as the Barrens. What a name for an area as lush with growth as that place had been. Kidding themselves that they were jungle explorers or sea bees carving out a landing strip on the Pacific Atoll. Is it atoll or atoll? I can't remember. I think it's atoll. While they held off the Japs, kidding themselves that they were dam builders, cowboys, spacemen on a jungle world. You name it. But whatever you name it. Don't let's forget what it really was. It was hiding. hiding from the big kids. Paradise, Lady T, Ben Beck, what's going on? Hiding from Henry Bowers and Victor Chris and Belch Huggins and the rest of them. What a bunch of losers they had been. Stan Uris with his big Jew boy nose. Bill Denbrough, who could say nothing but "Hi-yo, Silver!" without stuttering so badly that it drove you almost dog shit. Beverly Marsh with her bruises and her cigarettes rolled into her sleeve of her blouse. Ben Hanscom, who had been so big he looked like a human version of Moby Dick. And Richie Tozier with his thick glasses and his A averages and his wise mouth and his face was just begged to be pounded into new and exciting shapes. Was there a word for what they had been? Oh yes, there always was. Les Mot Just. In this case, Les Mot Just was wimps. How it came back. How all of it came back. And now he stood here in his den shivering as helplessly as a homeless mutt caught in a thunderstorm. Shivering because the guys he had run with weren't all he remembered. There were other things. Things he hadn't thought of in years. Trembling just below the surface. Bloody things. A darkness. Some darkness. The house on Nebolt Street. And Bill screaming. "You killed my brother, you fucker!" Did he remember? Just enough not to want to remember anymore, and you could bet your fur on that. A smell of garbage, a smell of shit, and smell of something else, something worse than either. It was the stink of the beast. The stink of it. Down there in the darkness, under Derry, where the machines thundered on and on, he remembered George. But that was too much, and he ran for the bathroom, blundering into his Eames chair and on his way and almost falling. He made it, barely. He slid across the slick tiles to the toilet on his knees like some weird breakneck dancer, gripped the edges and vomited everything in his guts. Even then it didn't stop. Suddenly he could see Georgie Denbrough, as if he'd last seen him yesterday. Georgie, who had been the start of it all. Georgie, who had been murdered in the fall of 1957. Georgie had died right after the flood. One of his arms had been ripped from his socket, and Rich had blocked all of that out of his memory. But sometimes some things come back. Oh, yes, indeed, they come back. Sometimes they come back. The spasm passed, and Rich groped blindly for the flush. Water roared. His early supper, regurgitated in hot chunks, vanished tastefully down the drain. Into the sewers. Into the pound and stink and darkness of the sewers. He closed the lid, laid his forehead against it, and cried. It was the first time he had cried since his mother died in 1975. Without even thinking of what he was doing, he cupped his hands underneath his eyes, and the contact lenses he wore slipped out and lay glistening in his palms. 40 minutes later, feeling husked out and somehow cleansed, he threw his suitcase into the trunk of his MG and backed it out of the garage. The light fading. He looked at his house with the new plantings. He looked at the beach, at the water, which had taken on the cast of pale emeralds broken by a narrow track of beaten gold. And a conviction stole over him that he would never see any of this again, that he was a dead man walking. Going home now, Richard Tozier whispered to himself. Going home now. God help me going home. He put the car in gear, feeling again how easy it had been to slip through an unsuspected fissure in what he had considered a solid life. How easy it was to get over onto the dark side, to sail out of the blue and into the black. Out of the blue and into the black. Yes, that was what it was. Where anything might be waiting. What's going on, Cool? Big G, what's going on? Okay, anyone got any questions? Or do y'all just want to go on to the next part of the chapter? Because this is still chapter 3. And the chapters get progressively longer after the first two. The first two is just to introduce you to what happened to George and the other kids. Oh, what happened to George? So the beginning of the first two, beginning of the two It movies. That's what you see in the first two chapters. So, anyone have any questions? Stop. Or do y'all want to get to this chapter is long. I'm not gonna. When I say it's long, well, let's put this. It's long for y'all. This is like the right amount for me. So, oh, this is another. Oh, so he breaks them up by interludes. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Mr. Rich, I just ended your part of the chapter. Well, if there are no questions, I'm gonna go ahead and sit and read. Like, off camera because I have done my hours. So, y'all gonna have to remember, I'll write it down on here. Page 71, part 3, Ben Hanscom takes a drink. And I'm about to go in here and read. All right. So, some of this gum is getting just as bad as what's that yellow gum from back in the day? Juicy, juicy fruit. And the other reason I'm about to get off of here is because my little timer is pissing me off. Because every time I put my hand down, she's right there at it. So she must need something. So, we thank you for joining us in the Shadow Gallery. The lights are out, the doors are closing. The Hellpaws will graciously and gratefully escort you on out the door. Please do not trip on your way out. They do not care. They will cast you out like a bag of bones or some runes. If you would like to book your private session, you may do so at my website, www.MadamShadO.com. No W in Shad'O. If you put a W in Shad'O, I'm not responsible for where you go, where you end up. By all means, like me, love me, share me, subscribe to me, turn notifications on so you know when I go live. Join me on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Big O. If you're a fan of Big O, wear my tag loudly and proudly. Yeah. You can purchase your pools either by, if you're on Big O, you can purchase them by buying and sending me shields, sending me treasures. A dragon is a whole different animal. We would have to discuss that. But yeah. Or you can purchase them directly from my website, which is probably more advantageous and it just makes more sense. But anyway. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we are going to go ahead and end this live. I'm going to go and sit and read. And I hope y'all have whatever day or night you deserve. Any energetic beings that are here that are not supposed to be here, that are not welcome here, that are not assigned here. You do not have to go home, but you do have to get the hell out of here and the hell out of Dodge. We thank you all. Y'all have a good night. Tomorrow I might just flat out do readings for y'all, and I'll just flat out do readings for y'all. So I will see y'all later.